my phone rang at 2 in the morning while I sat on a secluded beach in Costa Rica, watching the first golden rays of sunrise paint the Pacific Ocean. The caller ID showed Emma's wedding coordinator. Through hysterical sobs, she begged me to catch the next flight home because everything had fallen apart. I sipped my freshly brewed coffee, remembering how just 3 weeks ago, my own family had cut me from the guest list of my younger sister's wedding. I calmly told the coordinator I was unavailable and hung up. Within seconds, my phone buzzed frantically, with dozens of missed calls from family members who had not spoken to me in weeks. 6 weeks before that peaceful morning in paradise, I had been drowning in wedding preparations for Emma's dream celebration. As a freelance event planner, I had spent 8 months crafting every detail of what was supposed to be the most magical day of her life. I coordinated vendors, managed timelines, and handled countless crises with the precision that had built my reputation in Atlanta's competitive wedding industry. Everything changed on a rainy Tuesday afternoon when Emma's best friend Chloe accidentally revealed the devastating news. She assumed I already knew that my name had been removed from the guest list to make room for more important people. The words hit me like a physical blow, stealing my breath as I stood in the bridal boutique where we had been discussing final dress alterations. Chloe's face went pale when she realized her mistake. She stammered apologies while I stood, frozen, holding a delicate veil that suddenly felt impossibly heavy in my trembling hands. The other bridesmaids exchanged uncomfortable glances, their silence confirming what I desperately hoped was some terrible misunderstanding. That evening, I confronted Emma in her downtown loft, my heart hammering against my ribs as I climbed the stairs to her apartment. She was lounging on her cream-colored sectional sofa, casually scrolling through wedding inspiration photos on her tablet as if nothing had happened. When I asked about the guest list, Emma barely looked up from her screen. Her voice carried the same dismissive tone she had used since childhood, whenever she wanted to end a conversation that bored her. She explained matter-of-factly that Derek's family had demanded the guest list be trimmed, and they had specifically targeted me. Derek Williams came from old Connecticut money, the kind of family that had been making financial decisions for 5 generations. His father owned a private equity firm, and his mother, Victoria, chaired multiple charity boards, while maintaining their sprawling estate in Greenwich. Derek himself worked at a prestigious investment bank in Manhattan, earning more in bonuses than most people saw in yearly salaries. According to Emma, Derek's family found my lifestyle choices inappropriate for their social circle. I was a successful, independent businesswoman who had chosen freedom over corporate security, but Victoria viewed my freelance career as evidence of instability and poor judgment. In their world, respectable women either married well or worked for established companies with impressive titles and predictable paychecks. Emma delivered this explanation while examining her freshly manicured nails, speaking as if she was discussing the weather rather than destroying our relationship. She told me I was being selfish for not understanding their position, that this wedding was bigger than my hurt feelings. I stared at my younger sister, searching for any trace of the girl who used to sneak into my room during thunderstorms, who had begged me to plan her wedding because she trusted my vision more than any professional coordinator. Instead, I found a stranger who had traded our bond for social advancement. The conversation might have ended there with my heart broken, but my dignity intact if I had not discovered Emma's phone buzzing on the coffee table with a text from Derek's cousin. Unable to resist glancing at the screen, I saw a message thanking Emma for sharing those interesting stories about her older sister's past struggles. My blood turned cold as I realized Emma had been feeding Derek's family fabricated tales about my life. She had invented stories about addiction recovery and financial irresponsibility, painting me as a cautionary tale to justify my exclusion. These lies explained Victoria's tight-lipped disapproval. Whenever we had met, the way Derek's father changed the subject whenever my career came up in conversation. Emma snatched her phone away when she noticed my expression, but the damage was done. She had not simply uninvited me from her wedding. She had systematically destroyed my reputation within her new family by portraying me as someone who might embarrass them or create unwanted drama. As I left her apartment that night, the elevator mirrors reflected a woman I barely recognized. My face was flushed with anger and humiliation, my professional composure shattered by the realization that my own sister had orchestrated this betrayal with calculated precision. The next morning, I drove to my childhood home in Decatur, Georgia, desperately hoping my mother Patricia would provide the support and understanding I desperately needed. The familiar tree-lined street and white colonial house usually brought comfort, but today they felt like reminders of relationships I could no longer trust. Patricia was tending her prized rose garden when I arrived, wearing the same wide-brimmed hat she had owned for 15 years. Her movements were precise and methodical as she deadheaded blooms, a therapeutic ritual she performed whenever stress threatened her carefully maintained composure. I explained the situation, expecting maternal outrage on my behalf. Instead, Patricia set down her pruning shears and delivered her own crushing blow. She agreed completely with Emma's decision, stating that this wedding represented Emma's opportunity to elevate our entire family's social status. According to Patricia, my presence might jeopardize Emma's chances of being fully accepted by the Williams family. My unconventional career path and unmarried status at 28 reflected poorly on their parenting, she claimed. Patricia had apparently been fielding subtle questions from Victoria about why they had failed to guide me toward a more traditional life. The conversation revealed months of behind-the-scenes manipulation I had been oblivious to while focusing on wedding preparations. Emma had been systematically poisoning family relationships against me, sharing carefully crafted stories that portrayed my independence as selfishness and my career success as instability. She had convinced our father Robert that my lifestyle choices were a rejection of his values. Robert, who owned a small but successful accounting firm, had always supported my entrepreneurial spirit. He had been proud when I started my own business rather than joining a large corporation. But Emma had reframed this narrative, suggesting that my rejection of traditional employment reflected negatively on his guidance and financial provision during my formative years. Even more heartbreaking was learning about Emma's manipulation of extended family members. She had been intercepting and hiding supportive messages from cousins and aunts who wanted me involved in the wedding. Several relatives had sent gifts specifically requesting that I handle the coordination, unaware that I had been excluded from the celebration entirely. The cruelest revelation involved my beloved grandmother Rose, my father's 80-year-old mother, who had always been my strongest advocate. Emma had convinced Rose that I frequently criticized her traditional values in private conversations, that I viewed her generation as outdated and irrelevant. This explained the growing distance I had sensed during recent visits, the way Rose's warm embraces had become stiff and perfunctory. My cousin Marcus was the only family member still speaking to me honestly. He visited that afternoon while I sat on the front porch, struggling to process the magnitude of Emma's campaign against me. Marcus revealed that family gatherings had become uncomfortable exercises in discussing my apparent shortcomings with Emma, leading conversations about my need for guidance and stability. As the afternoon wore on, I found myself questioning memories and interactions I had previously taken at face value. Had Emma always been this calculating, or had her engagement to Derek awakened a ruthless ambition I had never recognized? The sister I thought I knew was disappearing, replaced by someone who viewed me as an obstacle to overcome rather than a person to love. That evening, while Patricia prepared dinner with unusual silence, I discovered the true scope of Emma's plans quite by accident. She had left her phone charging on the kitchen counter when she arrived for our weekly family dinner, and a series of text messages appeared on the locked screen. The messages revealed Emma's ultimate goal: complete isolation of me from the family permanently. This wedding exclusion was merely the first step in a calculated campaign to position herself as the sole focus of parental attention and family inheritance. She wanted to become the undisputed favorite daughter by systematically undermining my relationships with every family member. Emma discussed strategies for maintaining the negative narrative about me, even after the wedding, ensuring that holidays and family celebrations would center around her new married life, while I remained permanently sidelined. She had researched my business clients and planned to subtly damage my professional reputation within our community, forcing me to either relocate or accept a diminished role in family dynamics. The casual cruelty of these messages, the way Emma discussed destroying my life, as if she was planning a dinner party menu, made me physically ill. I rushed to the bathroom and vomited my body, rejecting the toxic reality that my sister viewed me as an enemy to be defeated rather than family to cherish. Determined to salvage whatever remained of our relationship, I swallowed my pride and made one final attempt at reconciliation. I contacted Emma directly, offering to attend the wedding as a regular guest without any special role or recognition. I would sit quietly in the back, celebrate her happiness, and cause no disruption to her perfect day. Emma agreed to meet me at the country club where the rehearsal dinner was scheduled, though she made it clear this conversation was a waste of her valuable time. The venue was everything I had expected from the Williams family pristine: white columns, manicured grounds, and an atmosphere of understated wealth that whispered rather than shouted about social status. I was not invited to the rehearsal dinner itself, but Emma agreed to speak with me privately before the event began. I arrived early and waited in the parking lot, watching elegantly dressed guests stream into the building, while I sat in my modest Honda Civic, feeling increasingly out of place. When Emma finally appeared, she was stunning in a flowing sapphire dress, that perfectly complemented her blonde hair and fair complexion. She moved with the confident grace of someone who had never questioned her place in the world, never doubted that doors would open and paths would clear before her. Our conversation took place on a secluded garden patio, away from the cocktail hour chatter drifting through the French doors. I made my case, carefully emphasizing my love for her and my desire to support her new marriage. I promised to maintain appropriate distance from Derek's family and avoid any behavior that might reflect poorly on her. Emma listened with an expression of polite disinterest, as if I was a vendor proposing an unnecessary service, rather than her sister begging for inclusion. When I finished speaking, she delivered her verdict with devastating clarity. My presence would create anxiety for her, and Derek and their peace of mind was more important than my feelings. Before I could respond, Derek appeared with his parents in tow. Victoria Williams was exactly as imposing as I had remembered. Silver hair, perfectly coiffed diamond jewelry that caught the evening light, and an air of supreme confidence in her own judgment. Derek's father, Charles, carried himself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to having his opinions treated as facts. What happened next still replays in my mind with painful clarity. Victoria began speaking about family values and the importance of surrounding newlyweds with positive influences. Her eyes locked onto mine as she described the challenges young couples face when dealing with family members who make poor life choices. She spoke about the responsibility of older siblings to set good examples about the way certain lifestyle choices can become cautionary tales that guide younger family members toward better decisions. Every word was carefully chosen to wound without appearing overtly hostile, the kind of sophisticated cruelty that wealthy families perfect over generations. Emma stood beside Derek throughout this speech, nodding along with Victoria's assessment while avoiding my gaze. When Victoria finished, Emma rose and delivered her own remarks, thanking everyone who really mattered for supporting their love. She looked past me as if I was invisible, her gratitude encompassing everyone present, except the sister who had spent months planning every detail of this celebration. The other guests' relatives and family friends who had known me since childhood watched this public humiliation unfold in uncomfortable silence. Some shifted in their seats, others studied their drinks with sudden fascination, but no one spoke in my defense. The message was clear: challenging the Williams family was not worth risking their own social standing. I sat frozen as Emma's words washed over me, each phrase of gratitude feeling like another nail in the coffin of our relationship. She thanked Derek for choosing her, thanked Victoria for welcoming her into such a distinguished family, thanked everyone for creating such a perfect evening to begin their married life. When she finally sat down, the applause felt like thunder in my ears. I rose quietly and walked toward the exit, my heels clicking against the marble floor with each step that carried me away from the people I had once considered my closest family. Nobody followed me. Nobody called my name or asked me to stay. The parking lot was dark and silent as I reached my car, my hands shaking as I fumbled with the keys. Inside the country club, the celebration continued without missing a beat, proving that my absence changed nothing about their perfect evening. That night, I went home and booked a last-minute solo vacation to Costa Rica, for the exact dates of Emma's wedding. I had never traveled alone internationally, never taken a vacation without careful planning and extensive research. But something inside me had broken beyond repair, and I needed to escape before the pieces cut me any deeper. I left a letter on my kitchen counter, explaining that I was removing myself from their lives, since that was clearly what they wanted. I wrote about my love for Emma, despite her choices about my hope that her marriage would bring her happiness, and about my decision to step away permanently, rather than continue being treated as an embarrassment to the family. As I prepared for my trip, I discovered one final betrayal that shattered what remained of my faith in Emma's character. While organizing my business files, I found evidence that she had been secretly sabotaging my career for months. Client referrals had been mysteriously drying up, and now I understood why. Emma had been spreading rumors about my unreliability to potential clients within our social circles. She told carefully crafted stories about missed deadlines and bridezilla behavior, painting me as someone who created drama rather than managing it professionally. Several major contracts had fallen through at the last minute, with clients citing concerns about my reputation and professionalism. This discovery was more devastating than the wedding exclusion, because it threatened my livelihood and independence. Emma had not simply rejected me as a sister, she had actively worked to destroy the career I had built through years of hard work and dedication. The morning sun streaming through my hotel room window in Costa Rica felt like a rebirth. After 20 hours of travel and emotional exhaustion, I had awakened to find myself in paradise. The resort overlooked a pristine stretch of Pacific coastline, where turquoise waves lapped against volcanic sand beaches and lush rainforest cascaded down mountainsides. My first day was spent in a fog of grief and disorientation. I wandered the property aimlessly, unable to appreciate the stunning surroundings, while my mind replayed every painful moment from the previous weeks. The other guests, mostly couples and families on vacation, seemed to exist in a different universe, where love and loyalty were givens rather than luxuries. Everything changed when I discovered a small beachside cafe tucked away from the main resort area. The rustic structure was built from reclaimed driftwood and decorated with colorful murals depicting local wildlife. Handwritten signs in Spanish and English advertised fresh fruit smoothies and traditional Costa Rican breakfast plates. The woman behind the counter moved with the unhurried grace of someone who had found peace with her place in the world. Sophia was 52 years old, with silver-streaked black hair, pulled back in a practical bun, and kind brown eyes that seemed to see straight through my carefully maintained composure. She served me coffee in a hand-thrown ceramic mug, while I struggled to hold back tears over my tropical fruit parfait. Without being asked, Sophia sat across from me at the small wooden table and began sharing her own story of family betrayal and recovery. 20 years earlier, Sophia had been married to a successful businessman in San Jose, Costa Rica's capital city. They had 2 children and what appeared to be a stable, prosperous life. But when her husband's business began failing, his wealthy family blamed Sophia for not supporting him properly. They convinced him that her influence was toxic, that his struggles stemmed from poor choices he had made under her guidance. Sophia's husband divorced her, and married his secretary within 6 months, taking custody of their children and turning his family against her. She lost her home, her social circle, and contact with her children, all because she had been designated as the scapegoat for his business failures. Rather than fighting a legal battle she could not afford, Sophia had taken her small settlement and moved to this coastal town. She opened the cafe with determination to create a new life based on authentic relationships rather than social obligations. Over the years, she had slowly rebuilt her connection with her children, who eventually recognized the lies they had been told about their mother. Sophia's story resonated deeply with my own experience. She understood the particular pain of being betrayed by people who should have protected you, the way family dynamics can shift overnight when someone decides you are expendable. We talked for hours that first morning, sharing stories about manipulation and gaslighting, about the difficulty of maintaining self-worth when the people closest to you systematically undermine your value. Sophia introduced me to concepts I had never considered: setting boundaries with toxic family members, distinguishing between love and obligation, recognizing that blood relationships do not guarantee loyalty or respect. As days passed, I established a routine centered around Sophia's cafe. I would wake before sunrise, practice yoga on the beach, and then spend mornings talking with Sophia while she prepared for the day's customers. Afternoons were devoted to exploring the region, ziplining through cloud forests, snorkeling in coral reefs, hiking to hidden waterfalls that required hours of trekking through dense jungle. Sophia's son Diego worked as a tour guide and took special interest in showing me the Costa Rica that tourists rarely experienced. At 30 years old, Diego had inherited his mother's wisdom and warmth, along with an extensive knowledge of local ecology and culture. He guided me to remote villages where families had lived for generations, to sacred sites where ancient petroglyphs told stories of civilizations that predated European colonization. These adventures were healing in ways I had not anticipated. Physical challenges pushed my body beyond comfort zones, while natural beauty reminded me that the world extended far beyond my family's narrow social circle. I felt stronger and more confident with each passing day, as if the person I was meant to be had been waiting patiently for me to discover her. Meanwhile, my phone continued buzzing with increasingly frantic messages from home. I had turned off notifications, but occasionally checked my messages, finding desperate voicemails from family members who had previously supported my exclusion. The wedding preparations were falling apart without my organizational skills and industry connections. Emma had hired a backup coordinator who was clearly overwhelmed by Victoria Williams's impossible demands and last-minute changes. Vendors were threatening to cancel contracts due to non-payment and communication failures. Rather than feeling vindicated by their struggles, I felt a strange sense of detachment. Their crisis belonged to a different world, one where I had allowed myself to be treated as dispensable despite providing irreplaceable value. I began documenting my healing journey through a travel blog that started as personal therapy, but gradually gained readership. I wrote about learning to prioritize self-respect over family harmony, about the difference between being alone and being lonely, about finding strength and independence rather than validation through relationships. The blog posts resonated with readers who shared similar experiences of family betrayal and social rejection. Comments poured in from people around the world who recognized their own stories in my words. Some had been excluded from family events for unconventional career choices. Others had been scapegoated during family crises. Many had discovered that standing up for themselves required walking away from toxic relationships. Within a week, my blog had gained thousands of followers. A post titled "When Family Becomes the Problem" went viral on social media, generating hundreds of shares and supportive messages from people who appreciated my honesty about family dysfunction. Unbeknownst to me, Emma's wedding coordinator had been documenting the mounting disasters on her own social media accounts. She posted increasingly frantic updates about vendor cancellations, family drama, and bride meltdowns, apparently seeking sympathy for the impossible situation she had inherited. Sharp-eyed social media users connected the coordinator's posts with my viral blog content, quickly identifying Emma as the sister who had excluded her own wedding planner from the celebration. The story spread rapidly through wedding planning communities and family drama forums, with thousands of people expressing outrage at Emma's treatment of me. My inbox filled with messages of support from strangers who understood the pain of family betrayal. Wedding vendors in Atlanta began reaching out, offering their services for future events, and expressing disgust at Emma's behavior. Several high-profile clients contacted me directly, having learned about my situation through the viral coverage and wanting to hire someone who had demonstrated such grace under pressure. The irony was not lost on me. Emma's attempt to damage my reputation had inadvertently created more positive publicity for my business than years of traditional marketing could have achieved. While I was watching the sunrise from my hammock on that fateful Saturday morning, Emma's wedding day was beginning with ominous signs 3,000 miles away in Atlanta. The backup coordinator Emma had hired was a recent graduate from event planning school who had never managed a wedding with the complexity and social pressure of the Williams family celebration. Victoria had spent weeks making last-minute changes that required vendor negotiations and timeline adjustments. The young coordinator, overwhelmed by demands that would challenge even experienced professionals, had made critical errors that were about to cascade into complete disaster. The first crisis emerged at 6 a.m. when the florist arrived, with arrangements that bore no resemblance to Emma's detailed specifications. Instead of white peonies and garden roses with eucalyptus accents, they delivered generic supermarket bouquets dominated by pink carnations and baby's breath. The florist claimed these were the arrangements specifically ordered by the coordinator, producing signed paperwork that contradicted Emma's original vision. Emma's hysterical phone call to the coordinator revealed that nobody had communicated the last-minute changes Victoria had demanded. The backup arrangements Emma thought were confirmed had never been properly ordered, leaving her with flowers that looked more appropriate for a high school prom than a sophisticated country club wedding. The catering disaster followed shortly after. The contracted company arrived 3 hours late with a completely wrong menu. Instead of the elegant surf and turf dinner Emma had selected, they brought vegetarian pasta dishes, intended for a corporate luncheon the following Monday. The catering manager apologized profusely, but explained that their kitchen had prepared exactly what was listed on the contract amendment, the coordinator had submitted 2 weeks earlier. Emma's dress crisis emerged during what should have been a peaceful morning of preparation. The final alterations had been scheduled incorrectly, leaving the gown 2 inches too long and loose through the bodice. The seamstress had been expecting Emma to arrive for a final fitting 3 days earlier, but the coordinator had never confirmed the appointment. Standing in her bridal suite, surrounded by bridesmaids in various states of panic, Emma faced the reality that her dream wedding was crumbling around her. The dress required emergency alterations that might not be possible in the remaining hours before the ceremony. Derek's groomsmen added to the chaos when 4 of them called in sick with food poisoning from the rehearsal dinner. Apparently, the country club's catering staff had served undercooked chicken to the groomsmen's table, leaving Derek with only 2 healthy attendants for a wedding party that was supposed to include 6 men. The venue complications reached crisis level when the country club manager arrived to inform Emma that they had accidentally double-booked the main ballroom. Another event, a golden anniversary celebration for prominent Atlanta socialites, had been scheduled for the same time slot due to a computer error in their reservation system. Victoria Williams took charge of the venue situation with the authoritative presence that had intimidated Emma throughout the engagement. She demanded immediate resolution, threatening legal action and permanent loss of the Williams family's considerable business if the anniversary party was not relocated immediately. However, the anniversary couple's family was equally prominent and equally unwilling to compromise. Their celebration had been planned for 18 months and included out-of-state relatives who had made non-refundable travel arrangements. The resulting confrontation in the country club's main lobby became a spectacle of competing entitlement that other members watched with fascination. The photographer Emma had hired as a replacement for my original recommendation quit mid-morning after Victoria screamed at him for taking too long to set up his equipment. He packed his gear and left without a word, leaving Emma without anyone to document what was supposed to be the most important day of her life. As each crisis compounded, the others, Emma's carefully maintained composure began to crack. The bridesmaids watched in growing alarm as she alternated between rage and despair, screaming at vendors one moment and sobbing uncontrollably the next. Derek, confronted with a version of his fiancée he had never seen before, began questioning everything he thought he knew about their relationship. The calm, collected woman he had fallen in love with was transforming into someone he barely recognized under pressure. Victoria's reaction was perhaps the most devastating for Emma. Instead of rallying to support her future daughter-in-law, Victoria began making pointed comments about organizational skills and the importance of family background in determining character. She suggested that someone from a truly distinguished family would never have allowed such disasters to occur. The extended Williams family gathered from Connecticut and New York for the celebration witnessed every moment of the unfolding chaos. They exchanged meaningful glances and whispered conversations that made it clear Emma was being judged and found wanting. By noon, with the ceremony scheduled to begin in 4 hours, Emma had reached complete meltdown. Standing in her ill-fitting dress, surrounded by wilted flowers and empty vendor contracts, she screamed that none of this would have happened if I had been there to manage everything properly. Her admission that she needed me desperately came too late, and in front of exactly the wrong audience. The Williams family had spent months hearing about my inadequacies and inappropriate lifestyle choices. Emma's desperate confession that she had sabotaged her own wedding by excluding her most competent family member revealed poor judgment that extended beyond simple planning mistakes. Patricia, watching her younger daughter's dreams disintegrate in real time, finally admitted that they had made a terrible mistake. Robert, confronted with the consequences of choosing social status over family loyalty, stood helplessly in the corner of the bridal suite while his daughter suffered through the worst day of her life. The final catastrophe occurred during the ceremony itself. Derek, having witnessed Emma's complete breakdown and the chaos that surrounded their entire relationship, called off the wedding during the exchange of vows. Standing at the altar in front of 300 guests, he quietly announced that he could not marry someone he no longer knew or trusted. Victoria's reaction was swift and brutal. She stood up in the front row and declared that the Williams family had dodged a bullet, that Emma's inability to manage her own wedding reflected deeper character flaws that would have made her unsuitable as a wife. She gathered her family and left the church, immediately cutting all ties with Emma's family permanently, and leaving them to face the social and financial consequences alone. The wedding guests, many of whom had traveled significant distances for the celebration, sat in stunned silence as the ceremony collapsed. The reception venue still expected payment despite the canceled celebration. Vendors demanded compensation for services rendered, and the Williams family threatened legal action for fraud and misrepresentation. Emma left standing at the altar in her poorly fitted dress, finally understood the full cost of her campaign against me. She had traded a loving sister for social advancement, only to discover that her new family's love was entirely conditional on her ability to maintain their standards of perfection. My phone exploded with activity while I was enjoying a leisurely breakfast of fresh mango and Costa Rican coffee at Sophia's Cafe. The screen lit up with a stream of incoming calls, text messages, and voicemails from family members who had not spoken to me in weeks. I watched the notifications accumulate with detached curiosity, making no move to answer the increasingly frantic attempts at contact. Sophia observed my reaction with knowing eyes, understanding that this moment represented a critical test of the boundaries I had been learning to establish. The first voicemail was from Patricia, her usually controlled voice, broken by sobs as she begged me to call her back immediately. She rambled about terrible mistakes and desperate need for my help, her words tumbling over each other in a way that suggested complete panic. Robert's message followed shortly after his tone, mixing desperation with barely concealed anger. He demanded that I stop being selfish and return home to fix the disaster that had befallen our family. His assumption that I would drop everything to rescue them after weeks of rejection revealed how little he understood about the damage they had inflicted. Emma's calls were the most heartbreaking to ignore. Her voicemails alternated between hysterical sobbing and aggressive blame, sometimes within the same message. She accused me of orchestrating the wedding disasters through vindictive sabotage, then begged me to forgive her mistakes and help salvage her reputation. In one particularly disturbing message, Emma claimed that my absence had cursed her wedding, that my negative energy had somehow caused every vendor failure and coordination mistake. She seemed genuinely convinced that my hurt feelings had manifested as supernatural interference with her celebration. As I listened to these messages over the course of several days, a clear pattern emerged. My family was experiencing consequences for their choices, but they wanted me to absorb the responsibility for fixing problems I had not created. Their apologies focused on practical needs rather than acknowledging the emotional damage they had inflicted. Sophia helped me analyze each message, pointing out manipulation techniques I had been too close to recognize. Patricia's tears were designed to trigger my guilt, rather than express genuine remorse for her role in excluding me. Robert's anger revealed his belief that I owed them unconditional service, regardless of how they treated me. The situation back home was deteriorating rapidly. Emma faced social humiliation throughout Atlanta's tight-knit social community, where news of the wedding disaster had spread through interconnected circles of influence. The Williams family's public rejection had branded her as unacceptable to other prominent families, effectively ending her aspirations for high society acceptance. Financial consequences were equally severe. Vendor contracts required payment despite the canceled ceremony, and several companies threatened legal action for breach of agreement. The country club demanded compensation for the double booking confusion and additional costs associated with the disrupted anniversary celebration. Most seriously, Derek's family was pursuing fraud allegations against Emma and her family. Victoria Williams had hired attorneys to investigate potential grounds for criminal charges, claiming that Emma had misrepresented her family's social status and financial stability during the engagement. The legal threat was real and potentially devastating. Victoria had documentation of Emma's lies about my character and career, which could be presented as evidence of a pattern of deception intended to gain access to the Williams family's wealth and social connections. My family needed me to serve as a character witness to testify about Emma's fundamental honesty, despite her recent poor choices. My event planning expertise could also help demonstrate that the wedding disasters resulted from inexperience rather than deliberate negligence, potentially reducing their legal exposure. However, my family's approach to requesting my help revealed their continued lack of understanding about the depth of hurt they had caused. Instead of addressing the emotional betrayal and systematic character assassination I had endured, they focused exclusively on practical problems that required my professional skills. None of the voicemails included genuine apologies for believing Emma's lies about me or acknowledgement of the campaign they had waged against my reputation. Patricia never addressed her statement that my lifestyle choices reflected poorly on their parenting. Robert never apologized for allowing Emma to turn him against me with fabricated stories. Most tellingly, nobody addressed Emma's deliberate sabotage of my business or the financial damage her rumors had caused to my livelihood. They wanted my help while ignoring the fact that Emma had actively worked to destroy my career for months before the wedding disaster. I found myself holding all the power in our family dynamic for the first time in my life. They needed my forgiveness, my testimony, and my professional expertise to navigate the crisis Emma had created. But I could choose to help them or walk away permanently, and they finally understood that their treatment of me had consequences. Sophia encouraged me to document every apology and admission of wrongdoing for my own protection. If I chose to help my family, I needed evidence of their acknowledgement that they had been wrong about me. This documentation would serve as insurance against future gaslighting or revision of history. The most shocking discovery came through social media investigation rather than family communication. Derek's family was not only pursuing legal action, they were actively working to destroy Emma's reputation throughout Georgia's social establishment. Victoria had contacted wedding vendors throughout Atlanta warning them about Emma's character and suggesting that association with her would reflect poorly on their businesses. She was systematically ensuring that Emma would never again gain access to the social circles she had fought so hard to enter. The vindictive campaign went beyond simple rejection and entered the realm of deliberate destruction. Victoria seemed determined to make Emma an example of what happened to people who misrepresented themselves to gain social acceptance. This revelation crystallized my decision about whether to help my family. While Emma had betrayed me terribly, watching her be destroyed by people with vastly more power and resources crossed a line I was not comfortable observing passively. I realized that helping my family did not require accepting their previous treatment or returning to old relationship patterns. I could choose to intervene on my own terms, establishing clear boundaries about future interactions and demanding genuine changes in how they treated me. The question was no longer whether they deserved my help, but whether I could live with myself if I allowed Emma to be completely destroyed without attempting intervention. The answer would determine not only their future but mine as well. After 7 days of radio silence, I finally called my family back from Sophia's cafe while watching the sunset paint the Pacific Ocean in shades of coral and gold. The distance and time had given me clarity about what I needed to say and what boundaries I required for any future relationship with them. Patricia answered on the first ring, her voice barely controlled, as she began a rapid-fire apology that revealed how desperate they had become. But I interrupted her before she could complete her prepared speech, explaining that I would only discuss their situation if certain conditions were met. First, I required individual sincere apologies from each family member who had participated in my exclusion and character assassination. These apologies needed to acknowledge specific actions they had taken and the damage those actions had caused to my reputation and livelihood. Second, Emma had to publicly retract every lie she had told about me, both to the Williams family and to potential clients in our professional community. She needed to take responsibility for sabotaging my business and work actively to repair the damage she had caused. Third, our family would participate in professional counseling to address the dysfunctional patterns that had allowed this situation to develop. I would not return to relationships built on favoritism, manipulation, and conditional love. Finally, I would help mediate their legal and social crisis, but only as a paid professional consultant, not as a family member fulfilling obligatory service. My expertise had value, and they would acknowledge that value through appropriate compensation. Patricia agreed to these conditions without hesitation, her relief palpable through the phone connection. She scheduled a family meeting for the day after my return promising that everyone would be present and prepared to meet my requirements. I returned to Atlanta the following Tuesday, feeling stronger and more confident than I had in years. The woman who boarded the plane in Costa Rica was fundamentally different from the one who had fled in hurt confusion 2 weeks earlier. Sophia had insisted on exchanging contact information and extending an open invitation to return to Costa Rica whenever I needed perspective or peace. Diego had given me a small carved wooden bird, explaining that it represented freedom and the courage to fly away from situations that no longer served my growth. The family meeting took place in my parents' living room, the same space where we had celebrated countless holidays and milestones during happier times. But the atmosphere was heavy with tension and unspoken recriminations, everyone understanding that our relationships would never return to their previous patterns. Robert spoke first, his voice thick with emotion, as he admitted that he had allowed Emma to manipulate his perception of me. He apologized for believing stories that contradicted everything he knew about my character, and for prioritizing social advancement over family loyalty. Patricia's apology was more difficult for her to deliver, requiring acknowledgement that she had favored Emma throughout our childhood and had used the wedding situation to continue that pattern. She admitted that her comments about my lifestyle reflecting poorly on their parenting were projection of her own insecurities about our family's social status. Emma's apology was the most crucial and the most painful to witness. She had lost significant weight in the 2 weeks since her wedding disaster, her face gaunt and her confident demeanor replaced by obvious depression and anxiety. She acknowledged every lie she had told about me, every professional sabotage she had orchestrated, every manipulation she had used to turn family members against me. Her admission revealed the calculated nature of her campaign and the depth of jealousy that had motivated her actions. Most importantly, Emma took responsibility for the consequences of her choices. She understood that Derek's rejection and the Williams family's vindictive response were direct results of her deception and poor character, not random misfortunes that had befallen her. With these acknowledgments documented and witnessed, I began working to resolve their legal and social crisis. My first step was negotiating a settlement with the Williams family that would end their fraud allegations in exchange for Emma's public admission of wrongdoing and agreement to stay away from their social circles permanently. Victoria Williams agreed to withdraw legal threats and cease her campaign against Emma's reputation in exchange for a formal letter acknowledging the deception and a binding agreement that Emma would never again attempt to gain access to their family or social connections. The financial settlements with vendors required more complex negotiations, but my industry relationships and professional reputation enabled solutions that protected my family from bankruptcy while ensuring that small business owners received appropriate compensation for their losses. I also worked systematically to repair the damage Emma had done to my professional reputation. Client meetings and vendor partnerships helped establish the truth about my competence and character, gradually rebuilding the business relationships Emma had sabotaged. Within 6 months, my event planning business was more successful than ever before. The viral blog posts and social media coverage had generated nationwide recognition, bringing clients from across the country who specifically wanted to work with someone who had demonstrated such grace under pressure. Emma faced longer-term consequences for her choices, but she also had opportunities for genuine redemption if she committed to personal growth and character development. The family counseling sessions revealed deep-seated patterns of competition and insecurity that had shaped her behavior since childhood. Patricia and Robert began addressing their favoritism and the ways their parenting had contributed to Emma's manipulative tendencies. They committed to treating both daughters with equal respect and support, regardless of their different life choices. I maintained clear boundaries about family involvement in my personal and professional life. Holiday gatherings resumed, but with explicit agreements about respectful behavior and consequences for boundary violations. Most importantly, I never forgot the lessons I learned during those transformative days in Costa Rica. Sophia remained a trusted mentor who helped me navigate difficult decisions with wisdom and perspective. I returned to visit her cafe every year, bringing clients for destination wedding planning retreats that combined business development with personal growth. The carved wooden bird Diego had given me sits on my desk as a daily reminder of my courage to fly away from toxic situations and my ability to create a life based on authentic relationships rather than obligatory connections. My story resonated with thousands of people who faced similar family dynamics and social pressures. The blog I started during my healing journey grew into a platform for supporting people navigating difficult family relationships and building lives based on self-respect rather than external approval. Emma's wedding disaster became a cautionary tale about the dangers of prioritizing social status over genuine relationships, but it also became a story about the possibility of redemption through honest self-reflection and committed personal growth. 5 years later, Emma and I have rebuilt a relationship based on mutual respect and clear boundaries rather than childhood patterns of competition and favoritism. She has learned to value authentic connections over social climbing, and I have learned to protect my peace while remaining open to family members who demonstrate genuine change. The Williams family scandal became Atlanta social history, but my family emerged stronger and more authentic as a result of facing the consequences of their choices and committing to healthier relationship patterns. I never regretted my decision to flee to Costa Rica during what should have been Emma's wedding weekend. That trip taught me that sometimes the most loving thing you can do for difficult family members is to stop enabling their harmful behavior by removing yourself from toxic dynamics. True family relationships must be built on mutual respect, genuine care, and shared values rather than obligation manipulation or social expectations. Walking away from people who treat you poorly is not selfish. It is essential for maintaining your emotional health and personal integrity. The beach sunrise I watched while my family frantically called me remains one of the most peaceful moments of my life, proof that choosing yourself over people who do not value you leads to freedom rather than isolation. Have you ever had to choose between family loyalty and self-respect when those closest to you failed to appreciate your worth? I would love to hear your stories and thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with your own experiences, please like this video and subscribe to my channel for more stories about finding strength through difficult family situations. Share this with someone who might need encouragement to set boundaries with toxic family members. And remember that choosing your peace always takes more courage than accepting poor treatment. Thank you for listening to my story, and I hope it brings you comfort and inspiration on your own journey toward healthier relationships and authentic self-love.